Thank you guys for having me. It's definitely a privilege to be here. And on behalf of Simon Roberts, Simon was supposed to be up here with me, but he is in the middle of actually implementing a very critical AI project for Toyota right now. And it's kind of launch time for us, so he was unable to join. So apologize from Simon, but I'm really glad that I could be here today. So my name is Lucas Smith. I am the Director of Agile and Program Services at Toyota Connected. There's a lot of parts of Toyota, so I'll give you a little bit of a background to make sure you understand where that is. So just a little bit about me before we get in. I started my career as an engineer. So I went to Penn State, computer engineering. I did my master's in wireless systems from George Mason, and spent the majority of my career doing digital and embedded programming and system design with Boeing. So I started off embedded development, quickly went into project management and leading development of different systems. Took a tour in Hawaii, was there for about 3 years working on our systems with the end users. And really, I think that was really an eye-opening moment to me to connect the work that my teams have been doing from an engineering side with the actual outcome that our customers wanted. So I took what I learned there, I came back to Boeing, I helped lead the Agile transformation of my division of Boeing, and then went into a consulting career for a while, and then landed at Toyota about 6 years ago. So happy to be here. Yes, I did get an advanced scuba diver, rescue diver recently, and my wife was very clear that she wanted me to protect my son and didn't really care about anyone else. So that's the primary responsibility, right? You gotta know your key stakeholders. We'll go with that. So I'm going to give you a little background on Toyota Connected, and the space that we work in, and hopefully will help you understand a little bit about what I'm going to share about how we're using AI and how we manage projects with it. So if you roll the clock back a number of years, Toyota had a number of different technology groups spread across the US and across the world that were helping either build or helping manage development of technology that went into the vehicles. In 2017 or 2016-17, as part of the merge here to Plano, down the street, they brought all those groups together into a group called Connected Technologies. So Connected Technologies is the core group at Toyota Motors North America that is responsible for all of the tech that you see in your vehicles. So your dash, your navigation, the mobile app that connects into it, the voice assistant, connecting to CarPlay, all of those pieces for the North America market. At the same time, we realized we are outsourcing a lot of this technology. We really need to make a concerted effort to insource and build some of these things in a way that we can control them, because technology is becoming an increasingly important part of everyone's experience in the vehicles, right? So that's where Toyota Connected comes in. Toyota Connected was created to be the advanced development arm of Toyota to basically insource and allow us to compete with some of the upcoming technologies. So I actually have a role between both of these organizations, and I basically lead, we call it the Agile and Program Services, but it's basically the PMO group that leads and supports the development, basically all of the development that we have going on across that. It's a pretty wide and complex space, so I'll give you a little bit of a picture of that. A little bit more about just Toyota Connected. So again, we were founded in 2016 around the software and data. So we started with the data with this idea that if we are going to connect all of the vehicles, every single vehicle that rolls off our line is going to have basically a cellular modem in it. And we have so much potential with what we can do with the data, the sensor data that's coming off the vehicles, to detect collisions, to save lives, to understand the wear on parts in your vehicle. We had this vision that was going to be increasingly important. So a lot of what Toyota Connected does is focused around that. We've been doing machine learning on that data from the beginning. And as many of you know, the current AI tools that we're all talking about are basically an evolution of the machine learning algorithms that have been in use. So we do that. We do design for the infotainment. We do data services for fleets. We manage basically the whole Safety Connect system. So people are probably more familiar with OnStar than Safety Connect or DriveLink, but that's basically the Toyota equivalent. So we have rebuilt that in-house. We manage 10 million vehicles on that platform at any given day. We're ingesting petabytes of data off all of our vehicles that are connected. So there's a lot of data and a lot of connections going on there. These are a couple of the things specifically that you would see if you operate a Toyota that we build at Toyota Connected. The rest of it is built at Connected Technology or with vendor partners at the moment. The SOS button, the digital assistant, we rebuilt an entire voice assistant inside the vehicle to be contextually aware. The infotainment system, airbag sensors, if your airbag goes off, we can automatically call 911 for you. We also have a lot of algorithms that are running either on the vehicle or in the cloud on either maintenance or fuel accuracy, et cetera. And we can deploy those things very quickly. We're about 400 people at Toyota Connected, and as you can see, we're a very lean organization. It's very engineering focused. At the moment, we're about 88% either engineers, software developers, or the tech side. So there's some overhead, but it's pretty lean as far as organizations go. So as you can see, we manage a lot of complexity. Just going to poll, does anyone think in the last 10 years, the work that your teams have been doing, the work that your companies are doing, do you think it has gotten, is anyone in a situation where it's gotten less complex? Okay. So I'm still batting 100% on this question. I've asked this a couple times. If you are in a situation like that, I would love to talk to you. I would love to figure out how you guys have done it. This is really the name of the game. Complexity is increasing for all of us. Everything we do is more connected. There's more data, there's more systems, there's more interconnects across the world. It's pretty obvious if you look back, right? If anyone has ever bought an old car or looked at one, you might have an AM radio as an option. Okay, that's about all you'd get. Otherwise, when you drove it off the car, drove it off the lot, you didn't have to have any interaction with Toyota at all. Okay. To today, there are so many connection points on this vehicle. There are so many chips running in this. We have 55 to 60 processors on there that are sending data to a central processor that sends it out over a DCM, a digital connection module, goes into a whole bunch of different systems. Things like digital key, over-the-air updates coming to the vehicles, the safety systems. There is just so much complexity and connectivity with this. We even get calls to explain from the factory. I visited our San Antonio facility a couple months ago, and it's always cool to see our factories. The whole time I was there, though, they kept talking to me. They're like, why can't we get through the whole production line if AWS is down? You've got to explain this to me. I'm like, okay, you understand that half of our services are dependent on something in the cloud, right? If there's an AWS outage, something could be a problem, or if AT&T network goes down, we've got a problem, right? The relationship is no longer a one and done. This is a continuing thing, and we have to maintain this. We have to watch this complexity over time. Primarily, to manage this and manage the products that we do, we've organized our teams into largely product teams. And that's kind of our base. And the reason for a product team is because of that continuing relationship, right? The expectation on your phones, everyone's got one of these, right? You're getting updates to your apps on here on a daily, a weekly basis, right? We can't ship a car and just expect it to be the same once it goes out. So we have to manage a lot of our work, not all of it, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but a lot of our work and efforts are managed in long-lived product teams that are focused on a particular function that the customer uses. Now, we get a lot of questions, a lot of discussion on, well, what counts as a product team? And I usually go back to, well, if someone can call in and yell at you about it, it's probably a product, okay? So they're probably not going to call in and say, oh, my DCM is broken, because they have no idea what that is, right? But they'll call in and say, my navigation doesn't work, right? Or they'll call in and say, my mobile app won't connect to my car and I can't remote start, right? So those are two examples of products that we have. We have a remote start team or a navigation team. So you can see it starts on the top with the product. product owner, product manager, who's really the responsibility to connect to our internal stakeholders as well as understand the needs of the customers. We typically, but not always, have both vehicle and cloud engineering. A lot of our functions some of them live just on the vehicle, some of them live just on the cloud, but most of the time at the end of the day, you need both of those functions to work. There's a lot of UI UX that goes into that, right? And understanding the customer flow, understanding the work that's involved there. And then obviously there's a ton of support that goes on around this, especially in the complexity. So this is me. I run the typically Scrum Masters, delivery leads, and project managers, depending on the situation. So we support the teams. We have platform teams and DevOps, and a whole bunch of other groups that we have to connect into up there, depending on the scope of the effort. Largely, I like to explain our product is our top, right? I want us to be more and more product-centric, more and more continuous funding for those, more and more customer-centric with that. And that's really typically an agile development product team, right? So they're iterating, they're constantly trying to be as responsive as they can to the market. It does heavily depend on the technology stack that they're in, right? So if I go here, some of our stuff that's in the cloud, we can deploy in a matter of minutes, or we deploy multiple times a day. So I feel like that's in a pretty good state, right? But if you get to stuff that's maybe dependent on firmware on a vehicle or a sensor, okay, that's going to take a lot longer for us to deploy. So we have a wide range of stuff there. We also have a wide range of things that we build internally or that we depend on others to build. So even here in our product side, say navigation, for example, we're not going to rebuild a mapping solution. There's a whole bunch of companies that have spent billions of dollars on that. We're probably just going to use their product, right? So we might need help in that group, though, coordinating with Mapbox or coordinating with Google to make sure that they deliver on what we expect them to for our efforts. So again, largely we focus here on the product portfolio. Underneath that, I would call something like a cross-product initiative. For example, if we need to update our digital key platform. So digital key might be something on the vehicle, it might be something in the app. And typically, if it's low complexity, and a bunch of characteristics there, but we'll try to just manage within that product portfolio, right? So we'll manage kind of between those two product teams. We'll say, okay, what's on your backlog? What's on your plan? What's this? How can we line up our schedules and just make this happen? Oftentimes, though, things get more complex in our organization. And so we typically start referring to those as cross-company initiatives. If this is crossing multiple parts of the organization, if it crosses too many of our products, probably we need a dedicated team to make sure that happens, right? So that is now where you're thinking maybe a typical project team. So we'll have an initiative lead, we'll have maybe a dedicated project manager, maybe a couple technical experts that are on that kind of small tiger team to help make sure that initiative gets across the line. Now, if you go to our vehicle lines, we're currently running about a 3-4 year full tech reset on our vehicles. That is what I would call a major program, okay? So now we're talking $500+ million, 50, 60 different vendors, touching every single one of our products, every single one of our vehicles across all of our production facilities around the world. That's a little bit of a complex situation, and we typically will have multiple dedicated program teams managing that, right? So there's a dedicated program team with a whole bunch of PMs, a whole bunch of experts, ties into the factory, ties into production, ties into vehicle design, that then coordinate out to either product teams or other parts of the organization for the work that needs to happen, right? Okay, this next vehicle generation, we're gonna update. We're going to do a full refresh on the in-car HMI design. So we have hundreds of developers working on that right now. We're going to redo the app. We're going to redo digital key. We're going to redo a whole bunch of the back-end components. So that's where a lot of the work from these teams gets funded or flowed in from the bottom. So that's just kind of a big picture. We've been managing this fairly well, and then this date happens. Okay, Does anyone help me out? What happened on November 30th, 2022? ChatGPT 3.5 came out, okay? So maybe, I'm looking around the audience here. Probably not too many people here remember the moon landing. I don't. Probably everyone here, maybe a few. I won't ask you to admit it. Thanks. Probably everyone here remembers 9/11, right? And what you were doing on that day. Now, this kind of snuck under the radar for some people. I have been and because we've worked in this space, a lot of us knew something was happening. If you remember, about 3 months before this date, the news came out that Google had fired a machine learning AI engineer because he had claimed that the AI system they were working on gained sentience, right? And was basically trying to hire a lawyer to prove it was a real person, okay? So that kind of went under the radar, but we knew at that point something was close, right? Something out there that people have in their basements and they're working on is passing the Turing test. So if people are familiar, the Turing test is basically a hypothetical test that says if you can't distinguish a machine system from a human, then it's past this point of an inflection point, right? And we really had not seen this up until until ChatGPT 3.5 came out. And to me, this is, we might not look at this and remember exactly where you were on that date, but I remember sitting down with my kids the next day. I had seen what this was doing, and I was like, look, called a family meeting. I was like, you guys don't know what happened yesterday, but the world has changed. Everything you're going to impact, all the stuff you're going to see at school, I call it, was like kids are going to be using this to write their papers. My kids come to me every day. They're like, hey, I saw these kids using ChatGPT to write all their papers, right? Teachers are going to have to try to figure out how to monitor that. Just based on the number of sessions here today, or the last 2 days, right? This is a very hot topic. We know it, we feel it. We feel that something has changed, and it's just accelerating. Now, I don't know if you know the statistics on this, but basically, people went to bed on November 30th. A few people knew what had happened, but within a couple days, OpenAI had become almost one of the biggest tech companies in the world, right? They are the fastest to 1 million users. It took like 3 or 4 days, right, to get to 1 million users. And it has just accelerated since then. Now, I think Facebook pages might have passed that, but it really wasn't a new product. It was really just people abandoning Twitter, right, and moving to it. So it was basically moving users. But I think we will look back on this day and say this is the beginning of a new change, right? And I think we feel it. I think it's also the elephant in the room, right? I think we're talking about it, in our companies. Funding is shifting to this. I can't tell you how many things we see AI attached to that really isn't AI. It's really just automation, right? But now everyone's calling it AI because funding is attached to it, right? And I even heard discussions this past couple of days. I was like, okay, I hear people talking about AI. That's probably more of an automation. That's not a bad thing, but you're having to put AI on it to get funding because that's where people want to put their attention, right? I think this has changed a lot, though, and we're going to talk about a few of the things that has changed, both in the projects themselves and the skills and in our companies. So yeah, change a lot. Within Toyota, probably many of you are familiar with the term Kaizen, right? Does anyone know what Kaizen means? Continuous improvement, thank you. Yes. So Kaizen is a continuous or more like an evolutionary improvement, right? So you have a system in place, you have a process in place, you have a technology in place. You want to continually improve that, right? We also have another word that's not as well known, but it's kaikaku. Kaikaku is a revolutionary change. So it's a discontinuation, right? So it's not a straight line, it's not a continuous improvement. It's a massive jump or a massive change that requires rework of your thinking, okay? And I'd like to propose to us, right, that AI is really a multiple kaikaku moment, right? This is not you can just continue to do continuous improvement in your particular area. There are all sorts of fields, all sorts of areas that are impacted, and it's revolutionary in all of them. In the tech space, right, I mean, at Toyota, we are talking about this all the time right now. There's so many things that we can do with this, so many opportunities. I'll talk about a few of them. I can't share a lot of them, right, because we're still in development on them. But I think this is revolutionary rather than we can just continue to do, in all cases, what we have. Not everything is impacted, but a lot of areas are impacted on this. So I'm just going to introduce this as this framework, process control framework, as we talk through the different areas. And I'll kind of refer back to this because for us, as I showed you before, I have work that fits on a huge spectrum of both complexity and types of work. On one side, I would have what I would call a defined process, right? So those are things that might go into our vehicle that we need to be repeatable every time, okay? So in a case where I can point at something and say, I know exactly what I want to build, I know exactly what our teams need to do, and then we need to reproduce 10,000 of them or 10 million of them, right? It makes a whole lot of sense to do a lot of upfront planning, a lot of evolution of our process, making sure that that's really well buttoned down so that we can have that again and again and again, okay? On the other side is more of an empirical process control. In this space, you have things that are unpredictable. You can't necessarily define all the elements of them. And you really need to manage the complexity and manage that work through empiricism or inspection, adaptation, and transparency, right? So I do think everything fits on a spectrum. It's not all, nothing is completely on one side or the other. And a lot of work has elements of both. But it's at least helpful to think about what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish, and what space it fits in instead of just saying, okay, we're going to Agile's the way all the time, or we're going to do traditional development on this all the time. It's neither of those, right? It's a combination of things. So I talked a little bit about that. For us, right, on updating our vehicle, right? So we've got this giant infotainment system refresh we're working on. There's a lot of different parts, right? If I look down on this side, I need to know that the size, the weight, the power, the specs, the physical specs on that thing are going to fit in the vehicle, right? I have CAD drawings associated with that. They've got to fit in every single vehicle lineup across the thing. we're going to have someone plan that out, detail that out, make sure that it fits exactly in line before we even necessarily build a prototype, right? There's not a lot of experimentation that has to happen there, and there's not a lot of variability. It's got to be exactly this, right? Now, maybe we have 8 and 10-inch screens or 12-inch screens that fit in the vehicle, but it's got to still fit, right? And if we have a bigger screen, then you got to have a bigger hole in your dash, and you got to have more power associated with it, right? So those things we can decide up front. We can know exactly how we're going to roll those out and lock those in. Other things, right, as you move a little bit to the right on this, are harder to nail down, okay? So the human-machine interface, the HMI on this. Yeah, I have a pretty good idea of what we want to update. I have some pretty good ideas on the goals here. I have an idea of what isn't working, and we have a whole bunch of examples of competitor products that we'd like to emulate different parts of or learn from, right? But there's a lot of evolution as you go through that, right? There's a lot of complexity in that. A difference in, where a button is on a screen can make a huge difference in terms of a user's interaction or how they perceive it. I remember at Boeing, for example, I had a situation where we built this whole HMI and we were testing it with our users, and I come to find out, unbeknownst to me, that the percentage of colorblind users in the Navy is 5 times the national average, okay? And none of them could see red, right? Or a large percentage of our users couldn't see red. Okay, now I've made my alerts in red, probably not a good color, okay? There has to be some sort of inspection adaptation cycle there where you get feedback along the way and you have some ability to change it. Now, BMW comes out with a killer new feature that everyone loves. We've got to be able to copy it, right? That's something I didn't even know about, right? We have right now, we have a whole fleet of vehicles that we test, right? Competitor vehicles, internal vehicles. One of the ones we're testing is the Mercedes EQE BEV vehicle. They've integrated ChatGPT directly into the vehicle. They did it in a couple weeks, right? It's a little bit hacky, it's a little bit hacked up, but they did it as a response to this, and I can drive this around and people can play with it already. Okay, question is, how long is that going to take me to get into our vehicle, right? That wasn't something that was on our radar 3 months ago or even 2 years ago, right? It's a new and changing area. So some of the stuff we can change quickly, right? If it's mostly cloud-based again, we can make really quick changes. If it involves cloud and maybe the head unit or the dash system on the vehicle, it's maybe a little bit longer. If it involves changing the physical platform on the vehicle, that's going to be a whole lot longer, right? So some things require more power than the vehicle can even produce, right? Or maybe we don't have the sensor we need. Okay, well you got to wait till the next vehicle refresh, right, to do that. But as you can see, I would say a lot of the things that our customers would consider as market differentiators tend to be on this left side. Things that are our company's differentiators, right? Like our ability to do production planning and inventory management and have our quality built into that. This can make or break our company from a cost and efficiency and a quality standpoint. But typically our customers are not going to call in and say, well, you have an amazing process on your line. I just love how it feels, right? They can't see that, right? But they know if they have the cool features that they're looking for. And those tend to be things that need to be much more adaptive. So as we go through this, I'm going to frame 4 different situations that I think most of us can find ourselves in within either your company, within your teams, or your product spaces, okay? So the first one is probably the least people, but that is if you are actually involved in building AI itself, okay? So this is building the algorithms. Again, I'm going to tie in machine learning here a little bit because they're highly linked. But if you are defining the algorithms yourselves, you probably know if you're in this space, if you're working with a bunch of PhDs who want to be left alone for multiple months and they don't want to promise anything, right? You probably know you're working on something in that space. Tuning and training the AI, now you're looking at using what someone else has built, using what OpenAI, using what another company has put together, and doing some either heavy tweaking or tuning it based on your data. So you're going to be pulling in a lot of internal data, not something that they have, right? Maybe it's your proprietary data. For us, we have a ton of data on the vehicles, the sensors on there. That I would call as training or tuning in AI, right? It's, okay, you know what you're going to use, but there's still a lot of uncertainty in that process and a lot of training, and performance is not a given. Third one, maybe I sort of switched the numbers here, but third or second, whichever you want to say, I'll say is integrating AI, right? I heard a lot of discussions primarily on the 2 and 3 here. But 2, I would say, is you're using a product and integrating it into your existing product. Like, okay, we're going to build a chatbot based on OpenAI ChatGPT, and we're going to put that on our website, right? Like, that's an example. You're working with third-party APIs. It's not, that part of it isn't maybe the revolutionary part because you've done stuff like that before. You've integrated with other people. But you're changing your product substantially. It's a new interaction, a new way for your customers to use it, potentially opening up new business models, new opportunities. So there's still a lot of exciting stuff there. And then fourthly, AI just enables everything. Regardless of what you have been doing, there's changes, and I heard a number of sessions talking about the tools and different things that people are using to basically just accelerate the work that they're already doing, right? A lot of our products and a lot of systems that you use, whether it's using ChatGPT or using Copilot, et cetera, can enable and accelerate pretty much any of your work, okay? So I'm just going to take a quick poll. I'm curious on the percentages of people that have these different situations in their company. So if you can pull this up, pull up your Slido, pull up your smartphone. Hopefully this works. It should be a live view here. You can do multiple answers, right? If you've got multiple of those situations, that's fine. I have every single one of them. So just curious on the mix here. 100%, okay. Okay, I'll give it one more minute here. Okay, so this is largely what I thought. The majority of us, pretty much everyone has got some aspect of AI that they can use to accelerate their work, right? Or they're talking about it. A lot of us are integrating third-party systems, AI systems, into our products, which I would argue is probably the smart thing to do. Unless you have a bunch of PhDs who are mathematicians or physicists or have been doing algorithms, you probably don't have the workforce to actually build a new AI, right? And frankly, by the time you built it, you'd spend too much money on it and OpenAI would evolve anyway, right? So it's better to focus your energy on what your strengths are, what you know your customers, you know your business, how can you integrate AI into that? We have a number of people who are doing the tuning and training, right? So we'll talk a little bit about the challenges there, specifically around data. Data is probably one of the biggest pieces of that. Okay, we'll keep it up. I'll do at least one more poll later, and we'll go back to it. So let's talk a little bit about building AI. I won't spend too much time here because I think this is the smallest percentage. I think there's about 10% of people here. But I want you to understand what this is in case you end up in this space or in case you end up helping or leading a project in this space. So again, I say, typically this is something that has never been done before, right? You are looking at something, trying to build something super high risk reward potential here if you're building these algorithms, but you can't point to a past performance. You can't point to something that has been done before and say exactly, oh yeah, we know how to do this, right? There is a lot of unpredictability here. There's also somewhat limited skill availability, right? I think this is going to be a hot field now in universities, even hotter than it was. But I think November 30th also changed another thing, right? You've got all these machine learning engineers who are kind of nerdy, wearing glasses. I represent that, and now they're like superheroes, right? So people are looking at these people like, oh my goodness, you're amazing, right? And they make a lot of money too. That makes another thing. So this is the new novel space. High risk, high reward. We can talk about non-functional requirements and how important they are, but you might have a goal of what you're trying to solve, but not really a clear path to get there, right? Or you may have a path that you think would work, but you don't have any guarantees you're going to be able to actually do it, okay? So an example, there's a number of projects that I've had the opportunity to be on that I would classify in this space. One of the projects, and I won't go into too many details, but basically what we had to do is we had to look at all of RF spectrum, which is a huge amount of data, look at what has happened in the past, and predict what is going to happen in the future, how people are going to talk using radio signals in the future, okay? So this had not been done before. This was a massive algorithm challenge. We got some of our best and brightest people together. We had a whole bunch of PhDs sitting in a room, and they told me, I'm the manager of this effort. They told me, don't talk to us for 6 months. We just want to go and work on this. Like, don't bother us. And I'm like, okay, I don't think that's going to work. I don't think we're going to get funding, right, for 6 months at a time, especially given the fact that you're not promising me anything, right? You're not promising to show us anything, right? But their point was, we don't know if any of this is going to work, right? And so our compromise was basically to come up with a system where we could show transparency of where we were without tying them into a corner, right? So what we did was ultimately, glossing over a few details here, but ultimately what we did was they were building this algorithm at this point, they were using MATLAB and Python, but the performance of it was not sufficient, right? We knew it wasn't going to be sufficient because we had to do this in real time. So we had one team that was developing the algorithm. They were training it on a huge amount of data, evaluating it, And I got them to agree to every couple weeks to come before our stakeholders and at least show how it was performing, right? We had some criteria, we had some performance measures. We said, we need to be able to identify or predict the future X%, right? And we'll show what percent we are. Now, they didn't love that because half the time they'd come in and they'd tweak stuff in the algorithm and it went down, right? Okay, we started off at 20%. Oh, sorry, we're at 10% this week, right? But the point was we built that into the discussions with the stakeholders that they knew that that was gonna happen, right? It's very, very important to set the expectations of this, to understand this is a super high risk, high reward. We're gonna show you progress, we're gonna show you what we're doing, but it's not a linear path to success, right? It's not okay, it's on, right? And the reality is we might not get to 100%, right? We might, okay, the video from before on Madagascar, well, we lost 2, I can live with that number, right? You're probably gonna get to a point here where it's solving the majority of your need or not, right? So maybe you can have a discussion of what that looks like. But the core thing was this cycle, right? So in this case, we had the algorithm designers, the machine learning team basically doing this, and then I had more of a core development team on the side that was working to make it real time, right? So whatever this team produced, the other team would take it and say, okay, how are we gonna get this into a real-time system, right? So they were porting it from MATLAB into C++, they were running it on a whole bunch of blade processors, et cetera. So that team was more straightforward, right? Because they could say, okay, well, whatever the algorithm they give us, we can probably turn it into a working subsystem, within a week or 2. The core here is that this really looks a lot like a PDCA cycle, right? So Deming's PDCA, plan, do, check, act, right? Now, your question is, which of these do you spend the most time on, right? In our case, they wanted to plan and do for 6 months before doing any checking, right? Probably not a good idea. So our compromise was to do this whole cycle on a much faster cycle, right? Every couple of weeks. And the goal was to show results, get the facts, be able to make a decision of whether this was going in the right direction or not. So I would put, if you find yourself in a situation where you are building AI, doing heavy machine learning on something that has not been solved, or in general solving a problem that no one has touched before, you are going to be most likely heavily on this side of the control chart, right? You need to establish intended outcomes if you can, rather than specific functional criteria, right? What problem are we trying to solve? That is the most important thing, right? And then as you check this and you test it against performance, you have an idea of whether you're close to that goal or not, right? Now, probably priority, from this case, you probably do need to establish which is your most important criteria. Do we have a drop dead time, right? The car is gonna launch on this date, so we only have 6 months. We gotta get as much functionality in as we can in 6 months. Do we have a fixed cost, or is it, we need to work on this until we solve this problem because that problem itself is so valuable, right? So I think that is a really important thing to think about, as well as your data set. I've heard a number of discussions on this, but the data that you have is super important. Is it a representative sample of what real life is gonna be like? Are there biases in the data? Is it legal to use? Are there privacy risks? Are the lawyers in your company to come and tell you can't use it, right? Like there's a lot of actual risks around that data piece. And so I think our roles in managing the effort, that is actually one of the key areas we can spend a lot of time in, is making sure the team has access to the right data and or evolve. Hey, we only have 20% of it right now, but I'll go and work with legal, I'll work with privacy, I'll work with security, I'll work with them to try to get that data for you. Like we know how to do that. It's maybe long and difficult, but that can be a key area where we can help unblock teams like this. Establish regular cadence to show it. Measure, this is a really important one, especially with the new ML algorithms. If you're doing this, incorporating user training or feedback into the system, because you're probably not going to get it right the first time. But if you can build a system that can improve itself, that's the key thing, right? So if you can build a system that can improve itself and continually get better based on feedback, you've unlocked a lot of value. And again, continually update the plan if you're in that case. So if I go on from there, right, probably more of us are in the situation where we're doing some sort of tuning or training, right? So this is, hey, there's we want to use ChatGPT or we want to use GPT-4, but we want it to represent us as a company. We have proprietary data, it never trained on it. We have some, we want it to be able to know what the customer bought before from an ingredient standpoint, right? Those are great examples of trying to tune this model, right? So I think there is still a good bit of unpredictability here, but the unpredictability is more around the performance and the outcomes, not so much the structure of it itself. Like, you can get something working, it's just, is it going to be good enough for the customer to use? Is it going to add enough value? Again, the data training and the data you pick is really critical. If you pick the wrong data or you've got out-of-date data, you're going to get bad information. Incorporating user feedback, as well as the choice of the model, right? There are a lot of different ML AI models out there right now. You have to understand what situation you're in, and that will help drive the selection of the model. For us, we are right now looking at redoing our voice assistant using one of the ML models or LLM models, but we don't want it to be connected to the internet all the time, right? What happens if you drive your car and you're in remote Wyoming, right? Okay, are we gonna lose all capability, right? Or are we gonna have some capability that's on the vehicle and maybe some that's cloud augmented, right? Those are important discussions of what you wanna think through is what is my situation? What am I trying to solve? Am I tied to the network? Am I tied off the network? What's my run costs? These things can be very expensive to run. So those are some really good discussions, as well as where are you getting the data? Do you have data you're training it on? Or are you doing RAG or retrieval augmented generation by pulling data from somewhere else based on a query? So an example of this, one of the things we've been working on is basically rebuilding our user manual system, right? A quick poll. How many people have actually used their paper manual that's in your dash in the last year? Last year? Okay. We got a number. So I'm surprised. Maybe I'm an outlier here, but I would rather have less weight, right? And I'm always struggling to fit other stuff I want in there, right? It always, when you open it up, you're like, oh, okay, gotta shift it, move stuff around. I actually was messing with that last night. You could make it bigger, right? There's always trade-offs, right? Size, weight, power, trade-off here. But what if we had technology that didn't force you to look through everything, right, to find an answer to something? Or you could ask, hey, what's this blinking light mean on my car? And we could connect that into the OBD data, right, and it could actually give you useful information. Okay, maybe you've got an oxygen sensor that's going wrong. Probably take that to the dealer. Okay, maybe your tire pressure's down. Okay, you can probably do that at a gas station, right? Like, give you some sort of indication there. So we're working on basically ingesting. So this is our data, right? It's our user manuals plus back-end data that we can basically pump into an algorithm, and it's not just text. We can do images, we can do other stuff, and tie that into something the customer can use, either in the app or maybe on the dashboard of the vehicle, right? So we think that could provide a lot of value and help people know how to use their cars more effectively. There's a lot of learning here, right? So especially, we're pretty confident on the text side. The image side, right, is probably a little bit less predictable performance-wise. But things are getting very good, right? You can, being able to take a picture, do some connection in the back end to where that came from, even do attribution, right? So, we all know that many of these models can be confidently wrong. So a big thing for us in this case is, okay, give an answer, but then have a point to a page, right? Or have a PDF, right, that is the source material that you can pull up and you could validate, right? Oh, well, that doesn't quite seem right. Let me double check. Okay, no, that wasn't right. Put a feedback, right? Okay, no, that didn't answer my question. Now we can tag that and work on fixing that. So this is just one example of what I would consider on the idea of training your data. Simon is working on a couple ones right now that involve heavy retrieval augmented generation or custom training of data internal to our enterprise. So he's got some launches, so we'll give him a pass on this. But I think the important thing here, right, this is not quite as far out there, right? You have a pretty good idea that you can get something working. You've done some of these things before. Your teams have probably integrated third-party APIs. You've passed data around. Like, those are not the novel piece here. But I think the question is really, what are we trying to solve for? What problem are we trying to solve, and trying to measure that, right? I think run costs is a big one that people forget. Okay, we can build this, but how much is it going to cost us per month to run, right? If I build this, if we build the user manual piece and it costs us, I don't know, $100,000 to run that server in the cloud every month, we're not going to get any savings by not printing the manuals. Like, that goes out of the water pretty quick, right? A key thing here is, are you going to have human in the loop, right? I think at this point, most of the models would say, yes, you probably need human in the loop on most cases. Maybe not every single one, but it's at least an important question. So is that human at your company in the loop? Is that customer in the loop? Are you going to do attribution here? Those are some of the key things you want to kind of establish up front. Again, what type of model are you looking for? The footprint, the performance, the response time, online, offline. Those are very important things to kind of establish up front, and that will shape a lot of the direction of your effort. Data set, I'm gonna harp on data set again and again. That's hard, right? Like, okay, does that group over there want to give up their data because their job is to print user manuals, right? They might not, half the team might not like that, right? Or, okay, you've got different, Lexus and Toyota working across that, right? Or legal considerations on customer data. Can we make it so it isn't attributable to anyone, right? Can we use it if we can do that, right? There's a lot of stuff around the data set and the training. So again, I think in my experience, that tends to be one of the big sticking points. So if you're managing an effort or you're working with an effort, spend a lot of time defining where we're gonna get this data, who's gonna give it to us, do we have agreement, do we have commitment for that data, right? And maybe establishing a win-win if you can, like, okay, you give us this data, we'll help you with this area, or we'll get you feedback. Like, the user manual is important, but the point is, how are we connecting with our users? How are we connecting with the drivers? That is your primary responsibility, right? Like, your job is to make sure that our guests and our users have a great experience. We'll help enable that, right? Similar system here. I do think that establishing a working system early, especially the integration, I mean, I don't know how many efforts, you have all these teams working on their separate thing, and then, okay, where does the shit hit the fan? Like, it's when you pull it all together and you try to make it all work together, right? That's where stuff hits the fan. So the earlier you can do that, the better on these kind of efforts. Again, showing regular performance is probably an important thing. So, okay, so that was 1, that was 2. Again, I think most of you said you were either between 2 and 3. So this is where you're using your established product and you're trying to integrate AI into it, okay? So this is, I think, you don't have to have a specialized skill set within your company to do this. You just have to know that these APIs are there, and you have to know your customer. You have to know if this will provide value. A big thing here is going to be the run costs, incorporating user feedback. And most things are going to involve some tuning or some aspect of your data. Otherwise, why are you building it? If you're just trying to copy something that's already out there, or copy ChatGPT into your system, it's probably not going to make a differentiator for you unless you can tie something in. But to be honest, there's a lot of money going towards anything that ties to AI, right, or anything integrated in AI. An example of this for us is we have a whole call center, right? So our call center takes SOS calls if you've been in a crash. It takes calls for people who want help in tagging destinations that they want to go to in our navigation system. And there's a couple things we've done here. The first thing we did was basically we realized that people who call in, our agents can't always understand what they're saying, right? And so we put a quick voice transcription agent in to basically while the agent's on the call, you can see what the agent or transcription AI or ML thinks they're saying, right? And that helped a good bit. I think that reduced our average call time by about 20% because it reduced the number of back and forth questions, right? It's like, okay, I didn't quite hear you, but I think you said this or this makes sense in this context. The next level that we've done is basically automating some of that, right? So for some of the functions like, hey, Toyota, can you route me to the nearest, I don't know, sushi restaurant, right? We probably don't need to involve a actual agent in that, although some customers like that. So that was where we put in more of an out-of-the-shelf AI agent, right? So that would be something where you could talk to this agent and say, hey, take me to the nearest sushi place. The agent could figure out where that is, push that destination basically to your vehicle. So we did that. We saw an average call time, right, reduced by about 40%. The completion rate went up, and there's a number of them that still get routed to a live agent if we need to. But this reduced the amount of time and the amount of agents we needed just to manage this, right? It provided a better experience for our customers without a lot of customization. So I think many of you probably have examples of this, whether you're chatbot or whether there's products that might just make your life easier, right? Or provide an automation case for someone that they would actually prefer to interact with this. One of our concerns obviously is, well, would people prefer to interact with this or prefer a live agent? If you went back 3 or 4 years, I would have said, well, most people probably prefer a live agent. We have seen the opposite now. So I don't know if that's just a pivot change in the last couple of years, but it's something we've been very, very closely watching. And for the majority of cases, they're like, this is better, it's quicker. I don't have to worry about sounding good to this person, right? I don't know, maybe we should have seen this coming, right? My kids never call anyone, they just text people, right? So if that's the case, maybe we'd rather talk to an AI agent that doesn't care what we look like or how grumpy we are. You know, it can take me to the sushi restaurant regardless. So I think we talked through a number of these. It's somewhere in the middle. I think I would just tell you, you have to judge this, right? You have to know your environment. You have to know your team. You have to know the skills, the risks that you've got. What are your risks? I mean, is this something you can plan out ahead of time and launch? Or is this something that you need to regularly test and evaluate user improvements? I think this is where I would lean towards that, but I think there's going to be a wider range in these type of situations. Now, I will say one thing, make sure that you understand that it's okay to remove this if it isn't providing benefit, okay? So I think, again, I know it's tricky with where the funding is coming from right now, but funding to build something is not the same as funding to run it forever, right? And we add so much complexity to our teams and organizations by never removing things that people don't use, right? If there was a single thing that would solve or reduce a lot of complexity for organizations, it's making the hard decisions to get rid of stuff that's someone's sacred cow, right? But some general manager at Lexus's wife likes this feature, right? But no one else uses it. So you have an idea what I'm talking about here. So I'll give you an example. So when we integrate with a ton of different systems, one of the companies we integrate a lot with is Google. And if we call Google and we've got a problem, right, one of the things that they've given us that we're using is not working right, guess what their number one question is? The first question they ask me. Did you read the manual? So, reboot, right? You restarted it. They ask me how many people are impacted. Okay? If I tell them 1,000 people, they're like, haha, good luck. If I tell them 10,000 people, they're like, haha, good luck. If I tell them 1,000,000 people, okay, now they're interested. Okay? So the question is, what's the impact? Right? I understand we care about it from a brand standpoint and an impact standpoint, but you cannot keep everyone happy. Like that's not a possible thing. And we have to transition people off of some of these things, because if you continue to put some of these AI services in, they cost a lot to run, potentially, right? And if people are using them and it's providing value to you, great, keep them in. If they're not using them and they're not providing value to you, why are you keeping them in? It's just a complexity that you have to maintain, that you have to add additional run costs to, and it's preventing you from doing things that would truly provide value. Right? So I heard a couple head nods. I saw some head nods on that. Right? How many? I don't know. I can think of so many times where I'm entering a system, or especially when I was in the consulting world. Right? You get into a company, they're there expecting me to be a silver bullet to solve all their problems. My first question is really, okay, how much time are you spending on tech debt or bug fixes, right? And they're like, oh, we're spending like 85%. And I'm like, how in the world do you expect me to fix that, right? Like, you have added so much stuff, like you're gonna have to make a ton of hard decisions now to get rid of features because you can't spend your time maintaining those, right? That's a natural progression. It's a natural progression of our products as we go from explore to expand to extracting value on our products. But you have to make conscientious decisions about that. So anyway, I think this is one that a lot of us will find ourselves in. And again, just be open to your team, understand the risks, really look at the data, right, and the run costs, and clearly establish what you're trying to provide benefit to. Okay, so fourth case, I think this one hits everyone, right? And I won't spend too much time here just because I know there were a number of great sessions that I got to attend that people are talking about, okay, how to use AI tools, how does this help me, how does this accelerate the work I'm doing? But I'll at least share some specific personal things just in case they're helpful. One key thing I would say here is that your organization is going to be best used just by understanding that these tools are coming everywhere, right? If you have any sort of product you're using internally, whether it's Teams, whether it's Atlassian, whether it's, I don't know, Monday.com, all of these things are building AI tools in right now, right? So you don't need to go out of your way, right? You're gonna spend a lot of money trying to go around this solution. Just understand what's coming and be prepared to use it, right? And maybe not everyone. I heard one of the good discussions was around, okay, do we roll this out to everyone? No, like you probably want to pilot these things, especially if there's data risks involved or privacy risks, or if there's cost concerns. Some of them are just going to provide them for free, right? They're going to be part of your solution. Some of them are going to try to upcharge you for them, right? And you need to understand whether that's worth it in your context or not. I'll talk a little bit about the ones I specifically use. But again, this I think enables everyone. You want to leverage the SaaS solutions that you've got. You want to establish what's your risk reward. A lot of it is the data side, right? Like, is the privacy there? Are you risking your company data? A lot of these initial ones, we haven't coalesced around a good pattern for protecting company data. And so there's a few that have done it well, and I think eventually we'll all kind of get there. But you may not want to be an early adopter if that's the case. Definitely pilot with small groups. There's a lot of ability to try this stuff on your own too before you even integrate it into your company. For PMs, for us, there's a lot of stuff being built. I'll be honest, I have not seen anything that can build a good schedule yet, right? If you find one, tell me, please. I have used ChatGPT and Copilot to understand risks on an effort, though, or understand data, or understand reports, or build reports, clearly. But being able to realistically plan out a schedule like that right now involves too many human elements and too much back and forth and understanding of your team and your capacity. Maybe we'll get there. I certainly think that's a trajectory. But I think most of the stuff for us is really just enabling and accelerating what we already do right now. Now, I'll be candid and say I don't think it's going to be that way forever. I think it's going to shift. I think as soon as it gets good enough, there is going to be an effort to really have the tools, be able to manage stuff, be able to pull reports out much easier. Like, it's going in that direction. So there will be more shifts here, but right now it's more accelerating what you do currently. So I'm just curious, which ones do you guys use? I'll talk in a minute about the ones that I find most helpful, but I'm just curious on which ones you guys use on a daily basis, which ones you're evaluating, which ones you see other people using. This is an open word, so you can put multiple answers in, I believe. ChatGPT, okay. Copilot, Azure, Claude, PMI Infinity. I don't know that one, actually. I should play around with that one. Gemini, okay. Einstein. So these are the chat bots themselves. What about tools that have AI integrated into it? Like what about, is anyone using Atlassian AI yet? Is anyone on the beta for that? Okay. So we've had a pilot going on for both Confluence and Jira. I can share a little bit about that, but yeah. I didn't find the JQL that useful, but Smart Sheets, okay, beautiful AI. Well, I think we have a clear winner. So, but this is coming to almost all of the tools that you use. Okay, so it is coming. Be prepared for that, but just know it is coming. So these are a couple that I use. These are a couple that I use on a regular basis. I know even basically in the last week that people were talking about ChatGPT 4.0, 4.0. 4.0 is out, 4 Omni is out, and it's a drastic improvement, right? Even in the last couple of weeks. So drastic changes there. I use ChatGPT all the time for rapid learning, right? If you're starting a new effort and you don't know something about that, you can find out a lot of information before you go into your first project meeting on this, right? You can find out a lot of information on I built apps a long time ago, but I haven't built them recently. So understanding what are the new architectures common in apps, I can find that out really quick. Image generation, ideation, rewording of stuff, generating ideas. My kids use it all the time for paper writing. I tell them, you do it for an idea, but do not copy, right, at this point. But their friends are doing it, right? That's what they're doing. Cursor is a really cool code IDE that it has an OpenAI integration directly into it. It's been a long time since I've done any development. I pulled this up, and within about an hour, I had a Python app working that could calculate scuba pressure at depth, right? I mean, I'm literally asking it to do this. And I think this one is going to be one of the biggest changes, whether it's Cursor or Copilot, is that what you're going to find, and what we're going to find soon, is that we're democratizing development efforts, right? A project manager or a PM or a product owner is going to be able to describe what they want and have a program build it for them in a lot of cases, or build the majority of it. And then at this point, you still need human in the loop, right, to connect the dots. But if I can build an app or an app that runs on a smartphone in an hour, just asking it to do that, that's pretty powerful, right? Amazon Q, we used Q recently to help us evaluate a gigantic code base that we needed to refactor. So we plugged it in, it ran an index across the whole thing. There were some things that it did well, some things that it didn't, but it's getting better. Copilot is obviously going to be very popular, primarily because it's getting offered for free, right? It's part of Office 365. And Microsoft is offering a lot of data protections around it, right? So they're basically indemnifying you. They're promising that they won't use your data. They're promising that if you integrate something that they shouldn't have, that they will legally protect you, right? So that is, I think you will see a lot of Copilot from teams. It's very powerful. It's using GPT under the scenes. It's not using the latest version. But there's a lot of capabilities there. We use it all the time for action notes, summarizing meetings, documents, email responses. We used it for code development, for repositories. We've had a whole pilot of developers using GitHub Copilot. In general, they found it doesn't fix everything right away. It doesn't get everything right, but it accelerates their process about 40%. It is huge amount of acceleration, especially. Okay, anyone who's done development, can you get developers to write tests at the same time they're doing development? No. Okay. What if you had Copilot writing tests for the stuff they were doing development on? Okay. So this is a huge way to both help the developers, but also improve your quality as you're doing it. Atlassian Intelligence, for those who are stuck on Jira, right? Not every, there's pros and cons, we'll say that. but they're rolling out an intelligent agent behind the scenes. It's in beta. We've been using it and testing it in a sandbox for the last 3 months. It's actually pretty good at knowledge management across Confluence. You can find documents, you can find sources, you can find information, summarize it really quickly. It's only as good as the data you've got. If you've got a whole bunch of stale data in there, it's probably going to get the wrong person when you ask, who's the POC for the app these days, right? It's going to get the wrong person. But if the data's there, I can find it really quickly. It's not as good on the issue searches. We were saying that it's not as good there yet, but it's getting better. Adobe, anyone who's got Creative Cloud, that has tremendous power to do image generation, image editing. Sorry, what? Firefly, right? All of these graphic UI, UX tools are integrating this. Anyone who's used Lucidchart, we don't use Visio, we use Lucidchart, Lucid Spark. They're integrating AI in there so you can generate, okay, let's generate a layout or a diagram or an image, right, for this meeting or for this team or for this discussion. So a lot of cool stuff here. I'd just say a lot of discussion in the past couple of days. Just get used to it, try these things out, think about what might be helpful in your context. So I just say, look, we've opened Pandora's box. This thing is out there. It's not going back in. There's no way it's going back in. And I think November 30th, 2022, we will look back on it and say that was a key pivotal change in most of our lives, whether we realized it at the time or not. So the question is really, what does it hold for me in that, right? How do we take this forward? Hopefully I've given you a little bit of a context just to understand some of the work we're doing, as well as if you find yourself using AI or your teams are using AI, how you might approach those types of efforts. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
If you want to connect, I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. We also run a meetup in the area at Toyota Connected. If anyone wants to visit, you're welcome to come. We actually have a meetup this week on Thursday that we're going to be talking about product development and the skills needed in kind of this transitionary phase. It's currently called the Agile COP because I took it over after COVID and that was what it's called. But really my mission with that meetup is to bring together all of the disciplines that are needed for product development. So project management, Agile delivery, product, UI, UX development, all of those, we need to work together to solve those problems for our companies. So anyway, thank you very much.